You're welcome to the Sanity and Success Podcast, the show that restructures how we approach life, work, and balance. It is time we erase unrealistic expectations that keep powerhouses like you playing small. I'm your girl, Emmelie de la Cruz, and together we'll find and preserve your peace while you stack this paper and live on purpose. Let's get it poppin'. You're not burnt out, you are unfulfilled. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to my therapist and just explaining how I was just so exhausted, so unmotivated, and just in a place where I didn't really know how to move forward. And when she told me that I wasn't burnt out, that I was unfulfilled, I was like, girl, ain't it the same thing? So I kind of went on this journey to learn more about burnout, the symptoms, and just how to cope with it in a world that just doesn't seem to be slowing down. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about all things burnout and what you can do to understand if you're truly burnt out, or if you're in a place of unfulfillment, or if you are just overwhelmed with stress. Let's jump right into it. So when I was talking to my therapist and she said, you're unfulfilled, I was a little bit confused because I was like, well, I like my job, like I like my clients, I like what I'm doing in business, like, what do you mean I'm unfulfilled? And she went on to say, you're doing things that are draining your energy and you're not prioritizing what you want. You're exhausted because you're fighting yourself every day and projecting that onto other things. So while I did love my job and while I do love my clients, there were some things that weren't aligned with me and just the way that I operate and the way that I function. So me trying to push through and make things work was actually causing me to be drained and causing me to be exhausted and burnt out. And that really freed me because I was just always considering everybody else's feelings, and I was always trying to bend and be flexible to other people's needs, but I wasn't flexible with my own needs, and I didn't prioritize what would make me happy at the expense of my own mental health. So I really learned so much about burnout over these last couple of weeks, going to therapy and then of course doing my own research, that I wanted to just share that with you, because if you're feeling burnt out, there's probably a mismatch between your work environment and your desires and expectations. This can be as an employee or as an entrepreneur. And in this episode, we're going to dive into the 5 factors that contribute to burnout and really help you assess where you are. Because it's possible that your burnout is rooted in resistance because you're holding on to things that you don't want to carry, you don't want to do, and you just might not consciously be aware of it. So it's literally weighing you down. So before we jump into all of the what you should do and how to cope and all the solutions that I know a lot of us high achievers want, we want those immediate fixes, right? So we can move on and get back to our lives and get back to whatever empire we were building. Let's just break down really quickly what burnout actually is. So social psychologist Christina Maslach, who coined this in the early 90s, defined burnout as the experience of exhaustion where the individuals who suffer from it become cynical toward the value of their occupation and doubt their ability to perform. That's deep, y'all. Burnout isn't just about being tired, but it's also about becoming cynical and disconnected from your work to the point where you're not even sure if you can do it in the first place. And what's so crazy is, although I know that I'm excellent at marketing, I've been so burnt out that I got to the point where I was literally thinking, am I actually good at marketing? Do people actually care about what I can do? I started having a lot of self-doubt because I was just so drained that I started to doubt the abilities of me being able to perform and me being able to get results. Not because I wasn't good or not because I didn't know how to do it, but just because I started to doubt my value because of everything that was required in order to provide it. I know I'm not alone up in here, okay? The World Health Organization actually added burnout as an occupational phenomenon in 2019, right on time for the panoramic, okay? While it's not a medical condition, it is something that the World Health Organization has deemed as an occupational phenomenon, and over 60% of people now that are working from home are experiencing some form of burnout. So you are not alone. I am not alone, and I'm definitely not ashamed to share these things with you guys and to be vulnerable with you guys, because if I don't do it, who is going to do it, right? We're going to keep thinking that we're crazy. We're going to keep being in our heads, punishing ourselves and talking down to ourselves because we feel like we're not good employees or we're not good entrepreneurs, when really in reality, there are just certain factors that are impacting our mental health and are impacting how we view ourselves and our work each and every day. So let's dive into the actual categories within burnout. So based on the official definition, burnout is categorized by exhaustion, aka chronic fatigue due to excessive demands and the workload, depersonalization, so having a detached attitude from work and not feeling connected to your work any longer, and then a lack of professional efficacy, aka doubting our ability to be successful or to perform. So when you take into consideration those three things, as our exhaustion increases, as we become more disconnected from work, and as our abilities to perform and be successful and work starts to decrease, burnout begins to exist. Our capacity as employees, our capacity as entrepreneurs starts to be hindered because we are dealing with these three areas when it comes to burnout, and then it starts to show. So if you've been hating social media, or really frustrated with work, or just in a place where you just can't seem to find the energy or the desire to do things, I want you to think about these 5 factors that contribute to burnout and how it could be impacting you in your day-to-day life. So the first factor that contributes to burnout is workload, which contributes to your exhaustion. The second thing is autonomy, so how much say you have in what you do. The third is having positive feedback or recognition in your work. The fourth is your community or your relationships. Do you have that sense of support and trust in your workplace, whether it's your actual company that you work for or the entrepreneurial community that you're a part of? And then the fifth thing is the extent that you get to fulfill your personal values at work. So all of these factors have some indication on how happy you are at work and how burnt out you may be. So I want to dive deeper into each of these so that you can get a really good understanding of how you can take your own personal inventory and figure out how these line up in your life. So in terms of workload, are you exhausted because you're doing all the things? You're trying to be consistent. You're trying to market your business. You're trying to get that promotion. You're just trying to keep your job while working from home and taking care of little ones and homeschooling, right? Are you trying to juggle a whole bunch of things to the point where your workload is now just unrealistic? When I was in corporate, when I was also a full-time entrepreneur that had an agency, both times I experienced burnout for one main thing. There was no documented strategy. It was just stress, vibes, and manual marketing. So every time that I was the first marketing hire within a startup organization, I would be stressed out because I was like, there was no path for me to follow. So I would start to add on more and more and more things to my workload because I thought that those were all the things that I needed to do. Same thing when I was an entrepreneur. I was so busy serving my clients, and I was so busy coaching and consulting and training and doing all the things and being everything to everybody else, that my workload wasn't dictated by what I could realistically and healthily manage. It was dictated by whatever the deadlines and whatever the to-do lists were given to me or created by the projects that I had on my plate at that moment in time. And that is a boundary issue, right? That is a communication issue. Taking on more clients than I'm able to serve, taking on projects at work that I know that I don't have the bandwidth or capacity to do, and just essentially doing things because I don't want to seem like a bad employee, or I don't want to disappoint or upset my client. Really, I just ended up disrespecting myself and my boundaries, and then feeling miserable about it. Not only being physically exhausted by everything that I had to do, but then also being mentally exhausted by everything that I had to keep up with. So take a look at your workload and really assess if you're working in real time and feeling like you're kind of never getting ahead, if you're allowing projects to really just stretch your bandwidth to the point where you're not even sure if a 40-hour work week is realistic, if you're staying up at night thinking about your to-do list and all the things that you have to accomplish and all the things that you have to check off, you probably have a workload that's a little bit too heavy, and you need to start to figure out how to streamline that, whether that's having a conversation with your manager or with yourself as the entrepreneur, thinking about how can I streamline, how can I delegate, how can I get some of these things off of my plate so that I can operate at the best of my ability, but also so that the company gets the best work output possible from someone who isn't doing a lot of things mediocrely, but is doing a couple of things very well and excellently. The next factor that I want to dive into is autonomy. So how much say do you actually have in what you do? Thinking about, are you doing what you want to do at work? Are you doing what you enjoy? Or are you doing what you think you have to do? We often talk about zone of genius in entrepreneurship, but there's also a zone of genius in the workplace. And lots of employers are starting to understand that it's better to move an employee around where they're a good fit and where they're able to have some autonomy and have some say and have some leadership than to just delegate and throw things on their plate without any rhyme or reason. Gone are the days of employees just being treated like random virtual assistants. And now we're looking at company cultures where employees have a lot more ownership around their projects and a lot more say in what they do and the workflows that are produced. So think about, in your case, what do you want and what do you think that you have to do? And what in an ideal world does autonomy look like in workflow, right? What things would you like to have a say in? What are things that you're doing right now that you secretly wish you could change or you could evolve? What are some ideas or some suggestions that you've been holding back on to your manager or to your team because you don't want to look a certain way or sound a certain way? You might be searching and seeking for a little bit more autonomy than you have right now. And in corporate America, we sacrifice a lot of what we want for a paycheck. But in entrepreneurship, we also sacrifice a lot of what we want for the idea of success. So we design businesses and we start to build careers that we detest or that don't align best with what we actually want for our lives because of society's or somebody else's definition of success. We build a passive business model that requires, a lot of investment in ads, and we, wonder like why we feel like we're not making an impact. Or vice versa, we might have an agency model because we want to sell high ticket services and we want to charge $3,000, but we actually hate the fulfillment of the services and we're only doing it because we want to be able to charge more money. Or we feel like we have to use organic marketing and show up online every day when in reality we're introverted and we would rather never be in front of a camera ever in our lives, right? So we start to make little compromises because we see other people's success and we think, okay, in order to attain that level of success, I need to duplicate what that person did. I need to duplicate the process. I need to duplicate the business model. I need to duplicate the blueprint. I need to work 40 hours. I need to work 50 hours. I need to travel to all the company events. I need to get in before the boss and stay after the boss, right? We start to make up all of these beliefs and all of these things that we actually need to have in order to be successful without ever considering what it is that we want out of the whole situation. Next is considering positive feedback and rewards or the recognition that you're getting in the workplace. So are you working a thankless job? Entrepreneurship is absolutely thankless oftentimes because you're just in it every single day. But as an employee, it also may be thankless where you're, building somebody else's dream, or where you are starting to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars for a company. And you start to look around and be like, damn, none of y'all gonna say thank you. Like, none of y'all gonna acknowledge what I do up in here, right? So thinking about, are you aware of the impact that you're actually making at work or in your business? Are you hearing thank you? Do you feel recognized and rewarded? Are you getting positive feedback? The grand scheme of things in business and at work, but also in like the day-to-day tasks that you do. So imagine how your self-esteem feels every time you try to post on social media and do a reel, let's say, and 3 people like it or 4 people see it, right? Now you start to feel like crap because you're like, damn, like I put all this effort into creating this piece of content that nobody engaged with. So now you're not getting any positive feedback, and now you start to feel a little bit self-conscious, and your self-esteem starts to take a little bit of a dip because you start to take that rejection personally, right? At work, we start to do things, maybe we chime in on a meeting and we share an idea and the idea gets shot down, or we suggest something and our coworker suggests something similar and they get praised and they get rewarded for an idea that was originally yours, right? Or, you're holding your department together and you're doing all of the things to like help the company run and be efficient and save money and generate more revenue. But, your boss is just focused on nitpicking one little thing that doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of the company plan, right? So all of those things, when you start to take that into consideration, really starts to take a toll on you emotionally and really starts to take a toll on you personally. And as far as your self-esteem, when you start to internalize a lot of those things, when you start to think that those scenarios or situations say something about who you are and not necessarily that it's feedback on what you did. So being able to really separate who you are from what you do is going to be very important when we're on this search for recognition and when we're on this search for reward and positive feedback, because we are not our jobs, we are not our businesses, we are not our marketing strategies, we are not our revenue numbers or our job titles. So it's important for us to be able to stand firm in who it is that we are and what we've been put on this earth to do. The next thing is workplace, community, and relationships. So how supported are you really feeling? Do you need to always be the expert and always have the answers, right? Do you feel like you are able to hold space for everybody around you, but nobody is holding space for you? Because you're the coach, because you're the manager, because you're the boss, the CEO, you are the top of the line, right? And everyone's coming to you for answers, and everyone's coming to you to be coached, and everyone's coming to you for feedback, but you don't have anywhere for you to go. You don't have anywhere where you can go be filled up after a day that you're pouring into everybody else. And for me, this was huge when it came to burnout. I always felt just depleted at the end of the workday and depleted after coaching calls or after client calls, because I felt like I was always giving, but I wasn't necessarily doing the things to replenish myself and fill myself back up. So I started to attend therapy again, journal, and just do the things that make me happy, so that when I pour, I'm pouring from the overflow. I'm not pouring from an empty cup, which I'm sure is an analogy that a lot of you guys have heard. As you're thinking about burnout and exhaustion and you're considering your community and your relationships, I want you to think about where you can be vulnerable and what spaces and places you feel like you cannot be vulnerable because you will lose authority. I can't be vulnerable online, or I can't be vulnerable with my clients, or I can't be vulnerable in my one-on-one meeting with my manager, or I can't be vulnerable with my partner because I don't want to look a certain way. I don't want to be seen as weak. I don't want to be seen as unstable. I don't want to be seen as somebody who doesn't have it all together or doesn't know what's going on. And really, that sense of vulnerability is a lack of intimacy. And then we start to become more and more detached from people. And that's how that depersonalization piece starts to happen with burnout, where we start to just become apathetic. We don't really care about what we're doing. We don't really care about who we're doing it with. We're just trying to keep our heads above water. And it's a very, very scary, lonely place to be in. So I encourage you to do some reflections on what places are you afraid to be vulnerable because you are afraid of how you're going to look and losing authority. And then thinking about, is that actually true? If I share what I'm struggling with to my manager, am I actually going to be looked at a certain way, or am I going to get the help that I need to be in a better situation? If I clearly communicate with my client what I have going on, am I going to lose authority, or am I going to actually gain my client's respect for being proactive and communicating accordingly, right? So we have to think about the lies that we're telling ourselves and the things that we believe about communicating our needs and sharing what we want and seeking the support that we need in certain situations. And the fifth and final factor of burnout is the extent to which you get to fulfill your personal values through work. And when I was sitting down thinking about this, I was really shocked that I don't even know what my personal values are, right? I know that I value freedom. I know that I value excellence and success and like all of these things, but outside of those kind of like generic ones, I don't really know what my values are. So one piece of homework that I'm going to be doing is sitting down and really thinking about, what do I actually value, and am I building a life and a business that reflects those values? Is the company that I work for a reflection of my values? Is the business that I'm building and the business that I'm running a reflection of my values? Because if I say that I value freedom, but I feel trapped at work, or if I say that I value, integrity and directness, but I create these super complicated marketing funnels to try to finesse my potential clients and customers, then I'm out of alignment and I'm gonna feel a little icky and a little out of integrity, right? I'm not going to be aligned with my personal values, and that's not going to communicate well when it's time for me to motivate myself to do things. We want to make sure that we're aligned and that we're not compromising our values for the sake of success or money, because then making the money just doesn't feel as good. Having the success just doesn't feel as good. And then our success that we're so busy chasing is going to come at the expense of our sanity. Hence the name of the podcast. So if there's anything that I want you to take away from this episode, is that stress and overwhelm is feeling like things are too much, versus being burnt out is feeling like there's never enough. Burnout is not about working too much, but it's actually about working ineffectively or out of alignment. And a Harvard psychologist, Dr. Alec Kanogia, said burnout is when someone who wants to do a good job and is capable of doing a good job, but there is a system that prevents them from doing it, and they get exhausted and then they give up. What if instead of trying to cope, we instead try to focus on creating or improving a system that works for us? What if we try to create a new system within our business or within our workplace? What if we try to improve the system that we were given by our coaches or by the person who was in our role before us? What if we really tried to find a way to align what we need with what our employers, our clients, and our businesses need, so that we can find some harmony and find some peace? I think if a lot of us started to look at what we need as the priority and our external sources as things that we need to learn to adjust, compromise, and communicate around, we would all be in a much better, less burnt out place. So as always, I'm going to have you sit with your thoughts. So after you listen to this episode, make sure that you sit down and take an inventory of your burnout factors, and then also see where you land for your values. What are your actual values, and how do your values line up with the business or the job that you are currently in? And is there some disconnect, and is there some misalignment there that you can start to tackle over the next couple of weeks? I would love it if we could hit the new year with just a refreshed sense of self, a refreshed sense of being, and a refreshed sense of purpose by creating environments that we can thrive in. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.
I'm so grateful that you hung out with me today. Make sure you follow us so you don't miss an episode. And do me a huge favor. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts. I want to hear from you. And if you're ready to start thinking differently, head over to sanityandsuccess.com for a free mindset challenge. I'll see you on the next one.